Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, the show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Terrance Weinzierl, and I'm here with my co-host, Carl Unger. Carl, how was your long weekend?
Well, Terrance, I'm still emerging from my turkey fog. It's been a slow start today, but man, we are diving headfirst into a pretty heady topic. How was your break?
It was good. It takes me, 48 hours to relax completely, but I am ready to be back at work this morning.
Yeah, so we're sitting here the Monday after sort of the Thanksgiving holiday, pulling ourselves together to talk about climate change.
Womp womp.
Yeah, I know. Not the easiest topic for any Monday morning. But this podcast is all about exploring the ways that design can make an impact on this topic. How can it nudge or inspire people to care? Can it even sort of lead people to make more sustainable choices or push for structural change?
Yeah, and climate change is one of the themes in our 2025 revision report, which itself is an evolution of our popular type trends reports. But we did something different this year. It's more conceptual and it puts a spotlight on social themes like peace and conflict, AI, climate change, and we looked at how messages around these themes are being communicated visually. So in short, Revision is a forecasting project where we collaborate with other creative teams to highlight key themes affecting us today and in the near future. So there are many trends reports looking backward, and we created Revision to inspire designers to look forward.
Yeah, we also challenged ourselves and our fellow creatives and creative partners to think about how to best communicate important messages and kind of consider the responsibility we have as designers and creatives to create positive change through our work.
Yeah, and one way that we've encouraged creatives to think about their role in crafting these messages is through these series of activations. We developed a really fun app that pairs music and type, and we collaborated with the D&AD Awards on some student work that resulted in this amazing project about handwriting and Parkinson's disease. The final activation this week is around the environmental hot and wet theme. And this one is manifested like a digital newspaper that's kind of captured in a mini site. And it features these really optimistic headlines from the future, what their current day sources would come from, and a bunch of eco design tips that are fun to read through. And I think it's very pretty, if I do say so myself.
I agree that it's very pretty.
But I won't give away which typefaces are featured, so you'll have to see them for yourselves. We partnered on this activation with Bruce Mau Design in Toronto, who is a natural fit for the topic, as Bruce Mau and his colleagues are known for solving environmental, social, and economic problems with design. And today we're delighted to be joined by a couple of folks from the Bruce Mau Design team, Yan Cheung, Director of Design Strategy, and Laura Stein, Chief Creative Officer, as well as our own colleague and revision mastermind, Phil Garnham, an Executive Creative Director at Monotype, and his assistant, Otto, the puppy.
Really, everyone's just here for Otto. So aside from talking about Otto and how adorable he is and how frustrated and overwhelmed Phil was, we'll also be talking about how design and type can impact climate change, some projects we've seen that have the potential to change customer behavior. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts in the background of our project with Bruce Mau Design. So let's get into our conversation with Yan, Laura, Phil, a little bit of me, and a little bit of Otto. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. My name is Carl. I'm your host today, and I'm here with four extraordinary guests to talk about a topic very near and dear to each of us, which is climate change and the role or lack thereof of design and type in influencing the public discourse on that topic. So let's do a quick around the room to introduce ourselves, and I'll start with you, Laura.
I'm Laura Stein, and I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Bruce Mau Design.
I'm Yan Cheung, and I'm the Director of Design Strategy at Bruce Mau Design.
I am Terrance Weinzierl, an executive creative director here at Monotype.
I'm Phil Garnham. I'm an executive creative director at Monotype in London.
And Phil, you have a new special assistant in the office with you today.
I do. He's just woken up for us as well. Here he is. Woo! My new miniature Schnauzer puppy, Otto. And yeah, if you hear screaming, yelps, chewing, it's probably more chewing. That's gonna be, you know where it's coming from. It's coming from my new puppy dog.
We all know it's really you. It's really you, Phil, just chewing on your desk.
Yes, it is.
Take the mic out of your mouth, Phil. Okay. So this group of people is not random. The four of you have actually been working together on a project as part of Monotype's revision report, our 2025 trends report. Phil or Terrance, why don't you give us a quick overview of that project? And then Laura and Cayenne, you can tell us how you were brought into it and what your thoughts are.
Sure, I can start. Monotype, a few years ago, we were looking at visual trends, and we decided to pivot to more trend forecasting. So rather than just look at these are the beautiful typefaces that popped into trends in the last year or two, what does type look like in the future? And that's really what revision was all about. And it was broken up into multiple chapters and topics. There's some commentary and work on AI, and climate, of course, is this chapter, and some others. And they're all unique activations and kind of unique stories and experiences to view through that future-looking lens. And of course, Bruce Mau design in general is, I think, known for having environmental chops and being, forward-looking and being experts in environmental design, I think. So, of course, having Laura and Cayenne are ideal partners for this content.
I think you nailed it, Terrance. This project is all about, what happens in culture, how culture actually shapes the look and feel of typefaces. So yeah, what better topic to discuss than the climate and explore that in relation to typography?
Yeah, well, we were approached by Phil. Phil and I had crossed paths on a project, and he asked me to give a little talk to his team, and we chatted afterwards. And he mentioned we were doing this really interesting project, and we were very excited to come on board. It sounded like a super interesting way to explore some of the ideas that we kind of have kicking around and actually put them into a form that could be a platform for other people to engage with as well.
Well, somebody on this recording should probably explain what the project is.
So we started to think about what is the intersection of design, sustainability, typography, and we knew we wanted to do something together. And we thought about, is it something interactive? We kicked around lots of concepts of what this kind of project or platform could be. And we set down a few principles for ourselves. And one of them was this notion of a kind of solar punk idea, which is, for some people who don't know, it is a kind of reaction to the dystopian narratives that we are surrounded by, that you see in things like science fiction, that you see in the way we kind of project what our future might be like. And the solar punk idea came from science fiction and has kind of expanded beyond that as well, to think about what our future might be from, what if we were, it was all renewable energy? What if our society was more community-based? What if, this kind of ripple effect of positivity around some of the choices that we make now? So it's a what-if question. And that, I think, resonated with everybody. We all thought that would be an interesting way to ground ourselves in what this thing could be.
And this concept kind of comes from an exercise that we like to do with clients sometimes when we're exploring potential futures or opportunities for their brand. So it comes from this exercise called Future Headlines. And the prompt that we usually give our clients is, imagine your brand doing something front page, newsworthy, and what do you kind of want to be known for? And I think it helps push us clients out of the kind of short term to more long-term thinking and big picture thinking, to consider, what do they value, what matters to their brand, and why what they do might be relevant to the audience in a kind of bigger picture social and cultural kind of way, going back to kind of Phil's point about cultural impact and relevance. So we took that nugget or that seed, and this exercise tries to do a similar thing by asking, what is the story that we want to write or create collectively about climate change and about the future? And I think it inherently kind of comes from this belief that, the first thing we need to do is really imagine and get everyone on board with what we're working towards, and then kind of create the strategy and the tools and the design to get us there.
Yeah, and the result is exactly that, right? An assortment of future headlines reflecting a society that has thrown its efforts behind environmental impact and sustainability and stopping degradation of our planet. And of course, with any headline, typography plays a huge role. So Phil or Terrance, you want to talk about how the type side of this came into play?
Yeah, of course. I think number one is we talked a lot about typefaces that read as news. So what does a newsworthy typeface look like? And, one big splashy part is the black letter masthead that Phil worked on. And we really went around the block, I would say, looking at the right kind of typefaces for it, and settled on a variable typeface called Macklin by Malou. And it has quite a range of expression, from very fine display serifs to slab serifs and kind of text, and there's a sans, and it really had the breadth that we were looking for. But having this, outward newspaper appearance gives it authority right away. So it looks serious on purpose. And I think that's okay. But my favorite part is the design tips that we added, which are very, small and palatable. And I think that those things are important to kind of counteract this overwhelming sense that the problem is too big to tackle. So I think that is a really important part of the user experience and the story.
What I love the most about this project is how, I guess it's the perspective that Bruce Mal brought to kind of reframing climate in general. You read so much about everything's bad. There's another issue. There's another climate disaster on its way. And I just kind of felt like, actually, Laura and Cayenne, they just came at it and said, actually, let's just make the future we want to live, through typography, and turn that negative sentiment into something positive and aspirational. And to Terrance's point, so just about the typography as well, in the fonts we've chosen, a lot of the conversation we had during the project were really around what impact does font data itself have on the climate? Can a single font really make meaningful change? And we started thinking about fonts themselves maybe can't make a whole lot of change, but actually maybe a collection of fonts or a collection of glyphs. So when we chose the fonts, and when Terrance chose the fonts, I remember we had this sort of conversation around, how many fonts does a design project actually need? How are you deploying those fonts? What formats are you using? Are you caching those fonts in your browser? Are you using smaller size variable fonts? And all of these things. And in the end, Terrance worked with Macklin, which is a great variable font, which actually really speaks to that family in terms of actually how well different font styles pair together as well. You choose, choosing a super family, a variable font over a combination of different paired fonts. It's come together really lovely. And I'm super chuffed with the work. This idea of future forward headlines is really exciting. And I hope it's an engaging experience for everybody.
I think what's interesting is usually when we run this exercise with our clients, it's analog, it's completely on pieces of paper, and we ask them to scribe these future headlines on their 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. So to see it in this kind of format and with the actual fonts, you see this exercise taken to the next level. So I appreciate Terrance's thought into, what fonts we use, and you really kind of understand how important design is and how important typography can be to make things tangible.
And I think to add one more point on there about, things like kind of squeezing the fonts themselves to have the smallest footprint possible, which is small but meaningful at scale. but to combine that with the emotional power of type to make the overall feeling stick is part of the story.
What we've kind of realized, I think, is that the micro small details in deploying typography actually have a really big impact when you think about like the carbon kind of footprint of kind of deploying your website to maybe hundreds, maybe even thousands of visitors all over the world. The way you do that, where you store the font, how far it's got to travel, how much data are you downloading. It's a really interesting experiment, and I urge anyone to like start thinking about those details because they really do stack up.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. We're here to talk about how design can solve or at least mitigate climate change. The cynical response is that it can't. Climate change is too big and overwhelming for design to make a dent. But we wouldn't be sitting here if we agreed with that take. So, Phil, Terrance, why are you optimistic? Why do you think type and design can impact climate change?
I think inherently, like, designers are kind of pretty aspirational, optimistic people, and it's in our nature to kind of respond to kind of the cultural condition, the cultural sentiment. It's kind of what we do to try and reframe the conversation. And I guess actually, I'll be the first to admit, like, there's a side of my brain which is kind of like, I guess it's the MBA kind of business brain part of myself, which sort of questions and judges whether, creativity can really save the world. But then, I think it's quite a natural conversation to keep having with yourself as well as a creative. But I don't know, like, I inherently I'm drawn to this kind of same conclusion that kind of reaffirms my belief in design and creativity. And because design and creativity is kind of how you make kind of meaningful stuff happen in life. At least for me, it's my kind of experience. So I think there's actually like even maybe a chance that design and creativity might be kind of the climate issues kind of biggest blind spot. It's where the storytelling is, it's where the solutioning, the innovation happens. So I guess kind of like my optimism comes from kind of my faith in creativity. And if I think about like kind of some of my clients that are working around this topic and in this creative kind of sustainable space, like Unilever, for instance, if you look at their brands, the kind of their most sustainable branding part of their portfolio, you can see brands like Dove and Ben & Jerry's. They're growing faster than any other brands in their kind of portfolio. So yeah, I mean, will typography change the world? It's a debatable question. I think for me, yes, undoubtedly. I'm going to say it with conviction because actually I think words and narrative, they're always part of the solution, always. And without that kind of compelling storytelling, I think there is no change.
Just responding to what Phil was saying in terms of storytelling, there's that often repeated quote by Sir David Attenborough that, in fact, we have all the tools to solve climate change. What we have now in front of us is actually a communication challenge. And that is a bit of a call to arms, I think, for all designers.
And I think I am optimistic by default, and maybe that's how I came into a design career. But I think what is exciting for me, or what comforts me, I suppose, is that I see the environment and designing for the environment as just another challenge in the design list. It's another constraint. And today it is a must-have constraint. It is table stakes. Today is the day. It's go time. We have to go. So it must be done. And so I think, designing for sustainability from the start is what gives me optimism about being able to solve those problems. There's not a single silver bullet. It is a collage of solutions that will make an impact. So there's not any one single thing, but rather a bunch of small things that will be meaningful at scale.
So, Phil, you mentioned some brands that you have worked with or been adjacent to that are kind of seeing success as they pursue sustainable policies and sustainable principles. So, question for you, Laura and Cayenne, do you think it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, isn't it? Is it the brands lead the way by adopting sustainable practices or sustainable posture and the customers follow, or the customers sort of pressure them into it. How do you think that dynamic plays out, and where does design sort of fit into it?
For me, it's a kind of both and. I think it's that classic thing of the handshake happening together. I think there needs to be a desire for change from brands, and it's definitely a kind of responsibility on their end as well, but also a demand from consumers and people in the world that puts pressures on brands and organizations to change.
I think that a lot of sustainable brands work very hard nowadays. I think people understand what the role of branding and storytelling and design is to help either break down barriers in terms of introducing something unknown to the public or something that is not necessarily something you see perhaps in your supermarket every day. But perhaps I'm thinking about specifically, Cayenne and we were talking about this the other day, this sustainable toilet paper. Who gives a crap? That has been following me around Instagram quite a bit. And they have this kind of very effervescent, joyful branding. It's really chaotic. There's lots of patterns and colors, and the type is really bouncy. And it's very optimistic and positive, and meant to make a mark and help you understand that, there is an alternative. You have to kind of be loud enough to be an alternative to your everyday toilet paper buying, which could be from virgin forest. So to actually look at something that is made from bamboo and renewable sources, design can help introduce that notion to people in a way that needs to happen.
This topic of like sustainability is for me, like I guess it feels like it's been a footnote to just soften like the tone of commerce. I mean, like, how do you feel about the idea of sustainability being the kind of underpinning kind of structure or the foundation behind every project and every creative brief?
I listened to a podcast called Can Marketing Save the Planet? And there was a great quote by one of their guests who suggested as a method of thinking of bringing sustainability into your practice is to put the planet in the room when you're making decisions. So every time you're discussing something, if you almost literally, I think they literally put a globe in the boardroom, and it becomes a stakeholder and a consideration. And I think that's super interesting because it's very easy to go about our daily lives without doing that.
I love that idea. I feel like we need to almost like put designers on the back foot. It makes them designers feel a little bit more uncomfortable, give it almost like a new set of conditions to every creative project that we do, because it will force, us as creatives to explore new ideas, to find new unknown solutions, just go a little bit out of our usual patterns of thinking. And I think there's a lot in that. But obviously we need politicians and bigger powers to kind of instigate that, but I think it's completely a viable idea that we adopt that as creatives.
And Cayenne, you mentioned the handshake being an important part of the process, and I was thinking about this analogy of the earth as a community garden, if you will, and that there's not one factor, but there's really this community of producers and consumers and states all influencing the community garden that we have. But it's also about controlling the input and not necessarily the outcome. So being able to focus on what we can do as an input into that system rather than trying to force an outcome that we don't have control over.
And maybe this goes back to what Carl was getting at before, and kind of thinking about fundamentally, like, what do we think is a designer's role and what do we think is the impact and power of design? Because I think for me, coming from a biology and a systems kind of background, like, design is not just a kind of formal or aesthetic practice. Like, it's not just about shape or color or composition, but that it exists within these kind of larger, bigger, sometimes hairy, invisible systems like supply chains and economics or even policy. So if we think of design as not only, what we make or what it looks like, but what it can do and why it matters, I think that's where it gets, exciting.
Yeah, just to expand on that more, I mean, I'm thinking about how the power is that combination of art and engineering. We can inspire emotion with art, with type, but we need an engineer to build the thing, to do the math, to do the science part, right? And I think the most powerful solutions, bring both of those things to the table, all of those things.
It's funny you mentioned that, Terrance. Like I read it on the BBC recently, just a really interesting story about like we're seeing probably a lot of traditional energy companies kind of pivoting towards kind of like these really weird and unexpected solutions. And on the BBC, they were talking about a guy that lives locally to me, actually, in Essex, that is now hosting in his property like a mini data center, which in his house has a cabinet, and it actually heats his entire house. Like there's the dog,
Yeah.
but he's actually heating his entire house off this off this computer power. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting solutions out there.
There's a lot of sort of small daily changes people can make. We mentioned paper goods and maybe other CPG products that we all use on a daily basis where we can go to a more sustainable version of it. But then there's also foundational changes that people kind of need to make if we want to make serious impact on climate change. And Terrance, I'm thinking of one I know you care about a lot, which is electric vehicles. And I think there's a really interesting kind of merging there of design, technology, and branding that's necessary to persuade people to ditch their internal combustion engine for an electric one, or put solar panels on their house, do other major changes. So talk a little bit about that, about how design can really help convince people that this is something that they just not only need to do, but want to do.
I think that's a really exciting view for me, is when the new sustainable product is simply better than the previous one. And the main message might not be this is better for the environment. The main message is this is a better product. And maybe it's an electric vehicle that is 10 times more energy efficient. It's quieter, it's smoother, you can recharge it at home, all those things. But it could be something as simple as a cutting board that's made out of bamboo instead of plastic. The bamboo is a better user experience. I would consider a successful design evolution is when the sustainable product is better than what it's replacing.
The question for us then is how does design help tell that story? Because as we know, people are instinctually resistant to change and resistant to new ideas when they're comfortable with the old ones. So what are some examples of design really helping people become comfortable with change and with new ideas and with new products that, again, we need to shift toward in the future?
Well, it makes me think of a project that Kyan and I worked on together, which is at Nature Fresh Farms. It's a greenhouse grower, essentially, and they use a lot of sustainable practices, recycled water. And we know that greenhouses are more resilient than field growing and probably really necessary for a future that's hotter and drier and that kind of thing. But there is a kind of resistance, or there has been, certainly when we were working on the project, to things that are greenhouse grown. People assume that it's going to be not as good quality or cold and clinical, and it's not as natural as the field. And we spend a lot of time trying to think about how to expose the greenhouse and illuminate the greenhouse as a kind of fertile place that actually has bees and good bugs and that kind of thing that are living inside the greenhouse and fertilizing and helping all these things grow. We created a new identity, new voice, new set of messaging and that kind of thing to really make this brand feel charming. That charm was a big important word for us as we worked on this, to bring greenhouse into the conversation as well and help people understand that this product is not worse and it's not in a cold clinical environment. It's actually a really active ecosystem and it's growing the same way that your field tomatoes might grow. Do you have anything to add to that, Kyan?
We also talked a little bit about Sustainable DC, which is this kind of citywide multi-year initiative in Washington, DC, that I think when they first started out, their biggest challenge was to get people engaged in sustainability. This was quite a few years back, so it was a little bit of a more newer kind of idea. And I think understanding Washington, D.C., what we learned was it was a city of kind of great divides. So you get the kind of nation's capital, but then there's also a great divide between haves and have-nots. So I think sustainability at the time was seen as this kind of like affluent or middle class kind of issue. Like you could afford to be sustainable because you had enough resources to give up things. And I think the reframe that we did was that it was really about sustainability. Like it was about being able to do more and not just about having less or reducing waste or doing these sorts of things. So that was that kind of like twist and reframe that we did with the branding and identity of the project and messaging to kind of get people attracted to and more people engaged in sustainability.
I think the idea of sustainability being synonymous with breathability and thinking about some of those outcomes that people might actually experience. So that was part of the project as well. So breathability, livability, you kind of bring it home into how you walk through the world and how you experience the world and what are the benefits of thinking more sustainably.
There's a really interesting thing happening here where what you're describing is kind of gets back to that David Attenborough concept. And it's almost easier to make the global argument for something that like this concept, this technology is good for the planet. But the real challenge is, why is it good for you, the individual? Why should you spend your money on this instead of that? And that's really what it comes down to. So maybe a good question for you, Phil, like how do we help people feel comfortable that this is not just a environmentally conscious choice, but a good choice for the individual buyer?
Good question. I was reading a brilliant piece earlier on today, actually, from my friend Kat Howe, a friend of Monotype as well, with her studio How, just some amazing work in this space too. And she said something that was really sort of struck a chord, which is like, you don't actually have to wear sustainability on your sleeve. This idea of sustainability in design, it doesn't have to equate to compromise. I was thinking a lot about like some of the successful kind of like sustainable branding projects of recent years, like Oatly, Beyond Meat, Diageo are doing some great stuff as well in terms of like trying to reduce the weight of glass so that they can ship more product in a lighter way and improve their manufacturing processes. And this, I feel like it goes back to the idea of storytelling, I think, but it doesn't have to be rammed in front of everyone, you know. I mean, if it's your interest, if you're drawn to like these kind of stories, then sure, seek them out. They're out there and plenty. You asked me how to solve the problem. And again, it comes back to that idea of like storytelling, but mindfully storytelling.
Well, the Beyond one is a fascinating sort of psychological case study, isn't it? Because they started out with a very earth tone green branding color palette and everything. And then they went full on red, and I think that's a really interesting decision because they brought their brand closer to kind of like traditional beef and meat packaging. Yeah. So what do you think's behind that?
I think it's about, and I was reading about this as well, like about how to almost like try and emulate the feeling of what people are comfortable with right now. You can't pivot instantly if you're in a different direction. You have to, gradually bring people on a journey. And I think, and again, I guess it comes back to storytelling. It's a narrative, and like all things, for meaningful change to actually stick, you need to kind of experience it yourself, and you can't rush these things, especially something like this, like changing your complete diet, for instance, like just like that's a personal kind of gradual pivot. Yeah, it's about like road mapping that journey in a very kind of like, sensitive way. Though their branding is very like abrupt and very in your face, I think they're trying to meet the consumer with what they're comfortable with, actually.
To Phil's point, it's cliche, but it's the authenticity of the brand, but also we're beyond this era of greenwashing and being able to, just print something in green ink and put a leaf on it is not enough. It has to be authentic to the experience, and environmentalism in general is just about awareness and the opportunity in front of you. And maybe that opportunity is 1% better, 1% lighter, 1% leaner in those ways. So to Phil's point, it's a journey. It took us decades or centuries to get to the point where we are now, and it will take centuries or decades to turn the boat towards sustainability, but we can do it, and we're on the way.
We talk a lot about, actually, Terrance, about how type is very much in the subconscious. So I have this instant reaction to the things we read without even realizing we're doing it. Actually, sustainable action is probably quite behavioral. It's very, and subconscious as well. It's like, the only way you're going to shift our internal behavior is by, almost talking to that subconscious and taking, like I said, going on that journey.
Understanding who your audience is and what's important to them, and then being able to encourage them to try your product or support a new, let's say, greenway that's coming up in your town, or support policy around transit. We are faced with decisions we have to make every day that are maybe economic decisions or convenience decisions and that kind of thing. So we have to tell the right story in order to get people on board. And there's some things that may not ever take off because the cost doesn't meet the requirements of your audience, and you need to kind of find that connection. So I think being really strategic about who your audience is and what they are interested in, what moves them, what inspires them, and that is about design. So we did a project in branding a greenway in Austin, Texas a little while ago, and that really was about rehabilitating the creek that runs through Austin, but also creating this community space and being able to bring this sense of incredible magic that is nature and culture mingled together in a downtown core, and bring that feeling to people even before it's built is really important, because you want people to support that and for them to kind of future cast what that experience might be, that it's inclusive and joyful and community-based. All these things are part of a kind of story and design, and do a lot more than showing a render, I think, of what it might look like. So when an architect shows a render, it's, oh, that looks pretty interesting, but it doesn't give you the feeling. You kind of understand how it's going to work. But if we can kind of think about this place may be a place for you, we can get people on side to support kind of big initiatives that might have really big environmental impacts.
So, Laura, I'll kick this one to you. So I know that Bruce Mouse Studio has put a lot of care for climate-related issues and puts that into practice. So you might be uniquely positioned to answer this question. How can designers, young designers, established designers, what would you say to them if they come to you and say, like, I want to make a difference. I want my work to matter when it comes to the future of our planet, for my kids, my grandkids, etc. What would you say to them to both either inspire or instruct them on that journey?
I think that some of the generations who are starting school now and maybe just graduating have a natural propensity to do this, but I would encourage them to continue to challenge the way things have always been done, to look at things with a bit of a critical eye and think, okay, just because we've always done this way, if I put this new lens on it, will it yield a new way to do things? And that's fantastic. I think we need people to be in there questioning what we do and how we do it in order to actually get to a place that's different than where we are now.
Cayenne, same question for you.
I would challenge designers to kind of build literacy or facility kind of beyond design itself. And this is kind of acknowledging that design is perhaps not just a formal or aesthetic practice. Like, be curious and interested in biology or politics or in the environment or technology, because I think with these big gnarly issues like climate change, like, they don't respect or fit neatly into traditional disciplines. So we shouldn't kind of compartmentalize our world or our facilities into neat, tidy disciplines either. I think if we're going to tackle these things, it has to be cross-disciplinary. So be curious, be optimistic about what's possible out there and creating connections, and not be isolationist or protectionist about, what design is, because that, I think, will shut down opportunities and kind of protect the status quo, and we can't afford to do that right now.
What about at the agency level? I think you guys have institutionalized climate awareness at Bruce Mau Studio and made it just kind of table stakes. What can other agencies like yours do to normalize this conversation with clients?
We are still learning. We are absolutely on a journey ourselves. We have more awareness in the way we do things, but I think you can never know everything. And I would say we'll continually learn together. I think as a collective here, we have lots of people here inside the studio who are interested in environmentalism. And let's keep learning together and then share that with our clients in a way that helps them understand that it's better for them, it's better for their brand. Recently, we had something that was sent to us, and we had a little group discussion, and we were looking at the mailer filler that was inside, and it was so great. Like, it was just designed perfectly. It's renewable, there's compostable materials, and just to kind of see these kind of very basic things that are part of our world in terms of making packaging and physical objects and that kind of thing. Like, hold up the things that are working really well and just elegant solutions and show those to your clients and get them excited. If you're excited, they're probably going to get excited too.
I love it when the packing material that comes with a product I've purchased is compostable. Right? I go, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And then conversely, when I get takeout and it's given to me in styrofoam, I almost just want to throw it out. But then that's the problem, isn't it? Right. Terrance, Phil, similar question for you for the world of type. Phil, you mentioned a lot of technical things that brands can do to sort of shrink, marginally their carbon footprint when it comes to type. That's the sort of thing where all these little actions add up, right? So how do you kind of normalize and socialize some of the things people can do specifically regarding type to make a small difference?
I think, like every inquisitive designer does already, push the boundaries, look at all these different resources that are available, especially around in the field of web typography and digital typography. The world is digital. Digital is reading. There's so much opportunity to actually make that process better. And Terrance and I work with so many brands, big global brands, that we're pushing this kind of like typographic kind of deployment techniques, especially through monotype fonts as well, like kind of like subsetting fonts, especially like in our platform. But yeah, I think do due diligence and actually just talk to the type design experts. It's not just monotype, but it's a huge industry, and just learn more about that, because it will really stack up and make a big difference in terms of carbon effectiveness. But I do, in terms of younger designers as well coming into the industry, I was going to say, actually just push back against your older creative director. We don't mind. Well, I don't mind. Just build a playbook for the studio. Let's refigure it out. Let's make it a conversation. It doesn't have to be a taboo kind of like, oh, this client doesn't like that, or it may be a political issue. No, it's not. It's a thing. It's happening. Let's just get on with it and sort it out.
Yeah, I do think those of us who've been in this for 20, 25 years have a moral obligation to listen to the younger generation, don't we?
Indeed.
Agreed.
And I would double down on what Kyan said about being curious and maybe even, allowing play as part of your exploration. I think those two things are important values to me personally as a creative. So I would encourage others to do it too. And like Laura said, it's impossible to be an expert at everything, but it is easy to be a beginner at anything. And so I think part of that is following your joy, and also just, you don't have to be an expert at every part of the environment. Just pick one lane and start small and talk with others who are interested in that topic. You will find people like you if you look for them, and you may bump into a mentor by accident. And that's kind of part of my story too. So yeah, start small and use typefaces as part of your story and your emotional appeal of the message that you have. And it's not just the typeface, it's the copywriting itself. Type as a vehicle for communication.
Start small, think big. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, Kyan, Phil, Terrance, thank you for your time today. Thank you for this conversation, and go forth and do good work.
Thanks so much for having us, Carl.
Yes. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
To read Monotype's 2025 revision report, head to monotype.com/type-trends. You can easily navigate to the multiple chapters listed there, and the hot and wet chapter is the green one, of course. You can't miss it. And to check out the activation we designed with Bruce Mao Design, head to monotype.com/type-trends/hot-wet.
Thanks for listening. If you like our show, please subscribe, rate us, and share us with a friend. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype. It's produced by Christopher Olin and Mia Sullivan. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Take care.